Welcome to the Foodamental studio session. This is unique because it is interactive and your hands are going to be getting dirty momentarily. Let me ask you, how many of you like coffee, just out of curiosity? How many of you cannot exist without coffee? How many of you cannot exist without coffee on the outside of your pork? We're going to be looking at some fun uses of coffee with Java, the rub.
You all raised your hands when we asked who likes coffee, and that's one of the coolest things to me about cooking with coffee. You can kind of mix it into any world cuisine. I grew up in the South, so we're going to do kind of a southern tinged version of this. So first things first, we're going to make our rub. The most important part of making the coffee rub is that you use a little bit of sugar as well. If you don't, it won't stick. What happens is when you roast it, the sugar caramelizes and helps the coffee adhere. So you get like a nice crust on the pork. So we're going to take 3 parts of coffee and then your 1 little cup of brown sugar, a little bit of salt, or if you work in restaurants, too much salt and butter and everything else, and a little bit of pepper. The brown sugar tends to be a little sticky and clumpy, so just make sure you work it together with your fingers. Otherwise, it won't stick. And then we have to trim it up nicely. If there's a lot of fat on top, again, the fat will melt, it won't stick. Well, no one wants to eat that anyway. But so you just want to pick one end and start underneath the fat and kind of work your way down. We're going to make sure we trim all the little sinew off, carefully, of course. I thought since we're having coffee rub pork, let's use a sauce that also incorporates the coffee. Calling it red eye gravy. You know, coffee with a shot of espresso is called the red eye. So what we used to always do is we would save all the trimmings from the pork, all the bacon scrap. Then after you roast it, there'll be a lot of drippings underneath there. So I've saved all that here, added a little bacon to it because bacon is delicious. And then that's the base of your sauce. So you're gonna render the bacon until it's soft, a little bit of onion, and then you're actually gonna pour whatever leftover coffee you have kicking around right in there, and that's gonna be the beginning of the sauce. The origin of this, I believe, is from way back in the early times in the South when everyone was very, very poor. So nothing would go to waste, essentially. You know, you would take all the trimmings and fat from your ham, save it, use it for breakfast the next day. The coffee you would save, use it the next day for a sauce. And it turns out some of those really, really simple, kind of cheap traditional dishes are some of my favorite ones. We're going to reduce the coffee by about half, and then we're going to add a little bit of stock. Just let that simmer, and then we'll finish it with butter and herbs. So we have these little napkins here. Another step, we've got to make sure that we kind of pat it dry. Any excess moisture, when you roast it, will steam and then make the crust. It doesn't need to be totally dry, just get any kind of excess water off of it. And we're going to take, you should have a little ramekin of oil. And we're just going to kind of dab our fingers in it and make sure that the loin is evenly rubbed with oil to help the rub adhere to it. And then we're going to flip it, do the same exact thing. So now once it's all evenly coated, we're going to take our rub and pretty liberally sprinkle it over. It's not all going to stick, but it's better to get a little more than you need. And then we're going to kind of pat it on there to try to make it stick. And after this, it needs to cure for about at least an hour. If you can let it go overnight, it's even better, because the salt will kind of penetrate the meat and make it a little bit more seasoned and juicy. My favorite way to cook this is to roast it in the oven, because I think it cooks more evenly and the sugar caramelizes and creates a really nice crust. But I've grilled it before and that works too. As far as temperature goes, I would go like 375, probably like 30 to 40 minutes, and then let it rest. These are grits. You know, when we opened Carriage House, people always ask me, like, how did you make your grits? People were freaking out about it, and like, I don't know what we do differently. The ratio is always the same. It's 4-to-1 liquid to dry grits. We use half milk, half cream, a little bit of butter.
When people ask you why it's so good, it's not just 4-to-1. It's the cream, butter.
Well, that might have something to do with it.
Maybe. Here, Chef, we have some feedback.
Yes.
Chef, this is delicious, great. I think
Thank you so
everybody
much.
gonna love it.
I appreciate it.
I'm thinking this would go well with a nice red wine. What would you recommend?
With pork, I always like Pinot Noir. I think that'd be a nice pairing. Or you could even go with a full-bodied like French white, like a Chardonnay, like a Macon. I think would be really nice. But
How about beer?
pork and beer always works for me, you know?
If you were going to smoke pork, would you do the same rub and then smoke it with a mesquite or a hickory, or is that just too much?
You might want to go a little more fruity, though, like apple or peachwood,
Or pecan?
I think. Or pecan would be great, too. Or even pecan shells. It works really nicely, yeah.
What other? So you mentioned lamb with this. How about beef?
Beef
Chicken?
works for sure. I love it with game. Elk, venison. I think it works really, really well with that lean gaminess.
I'm hearing chicken next to me over here too, but you know.
I don't know about that. I've never tried that. Chicken to me is like a little bit, it's kind of a delicate meat, really light in flavor. So I think you want something a little bit more robust to stand up to the coffee. You could try it though and let me know. I'm not always right.
How about brands of coffee? You know, I'm sure that fresh ground Colombian coffee is ideal, but how about good old Folgers or Maxwell House or something like that?
I think that'll do you just fine. You know, I mean, I used espresso for the one I made, but that's just because we had it at the restaurant ready to go. The only thing you really want to make sure of is like get it as finely ground as you can. If it's really, really like coarse crystals, it's gonna be kind of weird and crunchy when you eat the pork.
And now,
Everybody off.
thank you.